Well, let's meet our guests for today's discussion. Three prominent Israeli experts joining us on Inside Story, and they are Gideon Levy, a columnist at Haaretz newspaper. He joins us from Tel Aviv. In Lefki, Greece, Alex Coman, a professor at Holon Institute of Technology and a commentator on economic and political affairs. And also in Tel Aviv, Dan Perry, political analyst and former editor at the Associated Press, who's worked in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Let me start with you, Dan. I mean, the world is watching very closely the developments in recent hours. Trump's diplomacy or talk of diplomacy, and some being rather sceptical, saying he might just be buying time with the oil and energy markets and waiting while more military assets arrive. What's the feeling there from people in Israel about what's really going on?
To be perfectly honest, I think most Israelis know that it would be foolhardy to try to predict what Trump is going to do, or even to analyze whether or not he's telling the truth or what he could possibly have as his motivation. There is some suspicion that Trump backed down from his threat because of the Iranian counter threats. There is also a general sense in Israel that Trump simply wants to emerge from this a winner, and he cannot afford to appear to have ended the war simply because Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz. And therefore, some elegant solution is being sought out of this conundrum. The big question really is whether, when the war ends, if the Islamic Republic hasn't collapsed as such, and that seems to be unlikely, though most Israelis would welcome it, then what has it achieved? Will Iran be compelled to abrogate its ambitions with the missiles, with the nukes, and in particular with the militias?
Alex, if you look at that phrase that got a previous US president in trouble in 2003, mission accomplished, in terms of where we are militarily, do you think Israel believes its mission accomplished? Because Trump 2 weeks ago said, and I quote, very complete pretty much. And then a week ago, he said 100% of Iran's military capability had been destroyed. And yet, on the Israeli side, the Israeli military have said several more weeks. And in fact, the Israeli chief of staff said only on Saturday that the campaign was midway.
Yeah, very few missions have been accomplished so often. And I'm saying this ironically because Netanyahu and Trump are very similar in the sense that they are both demagogues, and they want to state victory time and time again. Trump is very aware of what happens in Wall Street, what happens to the financial markets. The financial markets, ironically, have responded very well to his promises of success. So whenever the oil prices went up and he calmed them, immediately they came down, and then they realized that actually we shouldn't take him too seriously, and they mounted again. And I'm afraid that this is going to happen yet again. So we shouldn't take these statements of victory, success, ultimate, whatever. We should not take them seriously at all.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has seemed as though he is joined at the hip with President Trump, and he's praised him repeatedly in this joint operation. But do you think from the beginning Israel and the US have had somewhat different goals in all of this, particularly on that key issue of whether there should be regime change?
Yeah, I think the government of Israel has certainly concluded that regime change would be highly desirable. And I think in this regard, rather unusual for the Netanyahu government, they are not misaligned with the Israeli public. I think most Israelis think that the Islamic Republic regime is illegitimate, has threatened them far too much, threatens the Arab world far too much, massacres its own people far too much, and they really do want regime change. They have lost all hope in dealing with this government, rightly or wrongly, whether you think the war is legal or illegal. From the American side, Trump doesn't care about democracy. He explicitly walked away from democracy promotion in the December national security strategy. He seems to be okay with autocracies as long as they are domesticated and do what he wants. There is little evidence that Trump has appetite for doing what's needed to achieve regime change in Iran, which is difficult to contemplate without boots on the ground. I think they toyed with it. They might have suspected that the regime might collapse upon itself in reaction to the original shock of the spectacular February 28th decapitation, but that hasn't happened. And I don't sense that regime change is on a table for the Americans at this point. They would like some sort of arrangement that Trump can spin as a win, and to a certain degree, because just as Professor Coleman had said, Netanyahu is no less of a demagogue. I think we can pretty much assume that no matter how the war ends, the Israelis and the Americans will present it as a victory, even if that victory is limited to the weakening of the regime. And of course, the regime has been weakened. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, they've taken out missile launchers and they've attacked more nuclear sites and they've badly battered the Besiege and the IRGC's headquarters, and they've caused damage. And whatever bluster the Iranians produce after the war, there is a reason to believe, or at least to hope, that they've been somewhat cowed and chastened, and perhaps they'll behave a little bit better in the future. But of course, that is in no way guaranteed. What has been made clear is that the Americans have crossed the Rubicon where they've shown a willingness to attack Iran. That was brazen. Some may think it was reckless. But I think it will factor potentially into Iranian behavior in the future. If the war ends right now, all sides will declare victory. The Israelis and Americans will say what I just said, and the Iranians, of course, given that the sum of their ambition is for the regime to stay in power so they can live to oppress their people another day, they will declare victory as well. And I suppose when there's a however fictitious win-win-win on the table in this way, the dynamic may be pushing in that direction.
In Israel, throughout the years, and especially in recent years, it is much easier to launch a war rather than to conduct a diplomatic compromise, a political compromise with any kind of enemy. You can much easier recruit the public opinion to launch another war. Third time in Lebanon, fifth time in Gaza, you name it, rather than to try once a diplomatic compromise, diplomacy, negotiations, compromising, giving up some of your positions for the sake of stability. I don't want to use the word peace, but Israel will always choose the war as the first option. And this reached a peak in this war, in which, as it was mentioned by your reporter, 93% of the Jewish Israelis support this war. This is a North Korean figure. In no democracy in the world you get such figures about any question.
On Netanyahu himself, I mean, you could say this has been a central goal of his entire political career, the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history, and he doesn't want to lose an extraordinary opportunity that he now has to destroy Iran.
To destroy Iran's Islamic Republic, which many people around the world and many Iranian diaspora leaders that I speak to regularly think is a favor to the Iranians. Netanyahu's in an odd position here where he might just potentially be right in the view of most Israelis. He's not accustomed to that. My friend Gideon speaks of the North Korean aspect of 90% support. There are many reasons why you might have 90% support for a thing. One could be, sure, North Korean level indoctrination and fear. Another could be that people are stupid. A third could be that it's true. And you will find that Netanyahu does not have 90% support on his dealings with the Palestinians, where indeed the dynamic is that the Likud and the right wing refuse to compromise. And so Israel's desperately divided on that issue. But when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Hezbollah, when it comes to Iran's other jihadist proxies that have spread chaos, mayhem, misery, and death around the Middle East, I think most Israelis have concluded there is nothing to discuss and no compromise that is possible. And that is why you have this level of support and this willingness to sacrifice. And of course, the Israelis, A, are closer to the facts, and B, closer to the consequences than the Americans are. So As a result of that, they're more willing to sacrifice. The idea, however, is uncomfortable for many Israelis. Netanyahu has minority support in Israel, and trust me, there is cognitive dissonance right now in Israel with people who support the goals of the war of scaling back the ambitions and abilities of a regime that is committed to jihad, but uncomfortable with being put in the position of believing the claims of Netanyahu and supporting his actions, especially if, from their perspective, God forbid, the outcome will assist them in the upcoming election.
Gideon, I mean, you heard there from Dan that Israelis are closer to the consequences, and Israel has taken a fair bit of a pounding during this war. You have the most sophisticated missile defense system on earth, Iron Dome, David's Sling, THAAD, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, and yet the missiles have been getting through, and that hasn't dented public support for the war. Why do you think that is?
Throughout years of brainwash, Israelis see the war as a force majeure, as something which was imposed on us and we can do anything about it, as the only open choice, as an earthquake. I guess that if it would have been an earthquake, God forbid, Israelis would react the same. What can we do? I mean, there is no alternative. We have to fight. We have to struggle. We have to run to the shelters 5-6 times a day. There is no other option.
Israelis, like myself, basically thought that there was a peace process that was started by Rabin many years ago, and it failed. And we believed that there would be peace and quiet. And on October 7th, we saw the reality. So I'm really disgusted by Gideon Levy's focus on what happened in Gaza, because obviously Israel did not initiate that. And what's happening is that Israelis, yes, what happened on October 7th made Israelis much more determined, much more tolerant of losses, because we've seen how bad these attacks can be and how painful they can be.
Israel's attack on Lebanon, which many human rights activists say is breaching the rules of war, that is not proportionate what is happening in Lebanon. Do you see that as a second front or a second war? Because in Lebanon, it is not a joint venture, a joint operation with the United States. It's Israel alone. If Trump tries to stop the war with Iran, does the war with Lebanon or with Hezbollah in Lebanon continue?
It's related very clearly. In Lebanon, the war is not with Lebanon. The war is with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is an extension of Iran. And Hezbollah is implacably opposed to Israel, and they've embroiled Lebanon in conflict with Israel. And basically, Hezbollah is at loggerheads with the government of Lebanon. The government of Lebanon wants Hezbollah disarmed. Joseph Aoun's government today basically took steps to essentially expel the Iranian representative. They've outlawed the IRGC. Israel is helping Lebanon get rid of Hezbollah, which has created a state within a state that is hostile to Lebanon. So I don't think we need to be naive about any of
With the greatest respect, Dan, I've not found many people in Lebanon who are saying what you're happening. The Lebanese people are not welcoming being bombed, are they, Gideon?
Well, by the way, I have.
Absolutely.
I speak to many Lebanese, and I can assure you they want Hezbollah gone.
I guess Dan is right. They want Hezbollah done, but they don't want to see their state, their country being destroyed one time after the other. Don't be wrong. With 1 million uprooted people from their homes, wandering around North Lebanon and not having a place to sleep, this does not exactly meet their dreams and does not make Israel more popular in Lebanon.
Gideon,
I mean, we really
think, Gideon,
right
honestly,
now,
let me ask you, do you think Israel wants to displace 1 million Lebanese, or is this an aid of freeing Lebanon of Hezbollah? Is it just some crazy desire to oppress the Lebanese?
Yeah. Right now, there are 6 million people uprooted in the Middle East. 2 million in Gaza, 3 million in Iran, 1 million in Lebanon. You really think that this is legitimate? You really think that this will bring peace to the region? You really think that this will bring those
I think what's happened is that a lot of hostility has been created by Iran and its proxies, bringing about these wars in which all this misery has occurred. But I do not think even the current government of Israel, of which I am no supporter, wishes to displace anyone from anywhere. People overthink with Israel. Israel wants Hezbollah gone. Israel wants the Islamic
But
Republic gone. And many Lebanese and many Iranians would welcome this.
Thanks to Alex Coleman, Dan Perry and Gideon Levy, and thanks to you too for watching.